Thank you very much. Please be seated. Protocol having been so well established, permit me simply to say good morning, brothers and sisters all. A special good morning to the students of Springer Memorial. As I was sitting there, a poem came into my head. I don't know how many of you know the poem by Hilton Vaughan titled Revelation. All of us used to know it back in the 1970s, all of us who went to school. But I think Hilton Vaughan might have been writing about the girls and young ladies of Springer Memorial when he said, "Turn sideways now and let them see what loveliness escapes the schools. Then turn again and smile and be the perfect answer to those fools who east and roam, the face that launched 1,000 ships and such like things. But keep tight lips for burnished beauty nearer home. Turn in the sun, my love, my love. What palm-like grace, what poise. I swear I prize those dusky limbs above my life. What laughing eyes, what gleaming hair." The words of Hilton Vaughan. The only part of that poem that probably does not apply is that Springer Memorial, we can't say that this is a school that has not embraced the value and the beauty of ourselves and our culture. So it doesn't apply to Springer. But I want to spend my time at the podium telling you, the students of Springer Memorial, a little bit about who you really are. Because it is not often that people tell our young people who they really are, what greatness they have come from, what heroic ancestors forged the path for them. And so I just want to spend a little time. I want us to reflect on ourselves as people of African descent, but I always insist that we should remember that this island that we live on, that we call Barbados, was once the home of the native people of the Caribbean, the indigenous people, the Amerindian people. The European history books refer to them as Arawaks. We know that they were also the Lokono people. But this island that we call Barbados, its original name was Ichiruganem. Ichiruganem. If there's one thing you learn today, learn the indigenous name of Barbados. Ichiruganem. That's what the indigenous people call this island. And that name means red land with white teeth. And the red land they were referring to was probably the clay found in the Scotland district. And of course, the white teeth would be the reefs, the coral reefs that surround Barbados and would have surrounded Barbados even more some 400 years ago. So let's always remember our indigenous ancestors who were subjected to genocide. Europeans, the same Europeans that brought our African ancestors across the Middle Passage in slave ships, committed a process of genocide against the native owners of this island. But we are here today celebrating Emancipation Day. It's our season of emancipation, but we focus on that day, the 1st of August, 1834 and 1838, when the tens of thousands of enslaved black Barbadians gained their freedom. And it is important for us to know how we gained that freedom. You know, the English settled Barbados from 1625. In fact, this is 2022. In 3 years' time, we're going to be commemorating 400 years of the British settlement of Barbados. So they arrived in 1625, but they didn't do too much, and they came back 2 years later in 1627. And that ship that brought them back from Europe in 1627 had 11 people on board it that should be of great significance to us. On their journey from England to Ichiruganim, they came into conflict with a Portuguese ship bringing enslaved Africans from Africa. They overpowered the Portuguese ship, and they took 10 of those enslaved Africans onto the English ship. That ship arrived in Barbados in February of 1627, carrying the first 10 black Barbadians to arrive in this island. And I often wonder why our scholars never focus our attention on those first 10. Who were those people? Those first 10 enslaved black Barbadians. What was their fate when they landed in Barbados in 1627? There was another person on that ship too that is very, very significant to the Barbadian story. An Englishman by the name of James Drax. There's a plantation in St. George called the Drax Hall Plantation. That is a plantation that has been in continual existence for almost 400 years, owned and run by the same Drax family that first came to Barbados on that ship in 1627. So they came and they established plantation slavery. They established slave plantations. Those plantations grew sugar, and back in the 17th century, sugar was like what cocaine is today. The Europeans had never tasted this sweet thing before. So it was like what an illegal drug is today, and it fetched very high prices. And so they became billionaires, James Drax and all the rest of them. But you know something? You hear about these sugar plantations. I want you to know that back in the 17th century, those of you who would have seen movies about the Nazi concentration camps, you've seen those movies, right? About the Jews and the Nazi concentration camps. Well, that sugar plantation in Barbados, back 400 years ago, that was the beginning of the concentration camp. That's what our ancestors were subjected to, an experience of terror. I don't even want to go into the details because the details are so gory. I mean, so terrible. But suffice to say, the concentration camp did not begin in Nazi Germany. The concentration camp began right here in Barbados, almost 400 years ago in the 1640s. And our ancestors who were brought across the Middle Passage, they had to fight. First of all, they had to fight to preserve their intrinsic humanity because they were brought across the ocean and deposited in locations of extreme evil and barbarism. Back then, an enslaved person was worked to death in 6 years on those plantations. And they had to resist. They had to resist the oppression, and they resisted in two ways. They resisted physically in a military sense. And don't believe anybody who tells you that Barbadian black people do not have a tradition of military resistance to slavery. Not true. The first resistance took place as early as 1649, when the slaves on one of the plantations in Barbados broke out in a rebellion. That was just one plantation, 1649. By 1675, they had organized an island-wide conspiracy. They were going to take over the whole island. They had so organized, all on slave plantations all across Barbados. They had little cells getting ready to burst out in this rebellion, take control of the island, abolish slavery, and institute an African-type kingdom. It was going to be ruled by a man called Cuffy. He was going to be King Cuffy of Barbados. But unfortunately, it was betrayed. And the slave masters became aware of it. Many people were arrested. People were tortured. People were executed. People were burnt at the stake, because one of the ways of executing you was to set you on fire, to burn you alive. And I want to tell you one story coming out of that 1675 episode. They were torturing this African man, and many people had been executed already. So they were torturing this man, and they were telling him, look, give us. And next to this man who was being tortured was an enslaved man called Tony, who had also been arrested. And the man who was being tortured at one point asked for water. And Tony understood that asking for water was actually a sign that you were going to talk. And when he asked for water, Tony turned to him and said, "You fool, you fool, are you going to talk and give them more names? Don't you see how many of our brothers they have killed already? Do you want them to kill all of us?" And so the man kept quiet. The man kept quiet. The white people around said to Tony, "Tony, you are going to fry just now." Tony said to them, "If you roast me today, you can't roast me tomorrow. Go ahead." In other words, Tony was so full of courage. Tony had just intervened to do something so heroic to save fellow blacks from being executed. And they told Tony, "Tony, because you did that, we are going to burn you." And Tony had the dignity and the courage to defiantly declare, "If you roast me today, you can't roast me tomorrow. Go ahead." That is your ancestor. That is the example we of this generation have to live up to. That is the kind of sacrifice that paved the way for us. So we resisted. We had the slave rebellion in 1675, 1683, 1686, 1692, 1701. Unfortunately, they were all of them, they were sold out. So before they could actually fully get off the ground, the conspirators were found out and people were executed. People, And then finally, 1816. Not only was the conspiracy put in place, but on this occasion it was not sold out. And we had the Bussa Slave Rebellion, the first major slave rebellion of the 19th century. And the Bussa Slave Rebellion sent such a message to the British authorities: look, we cannot continue this system of slavery, because if we do not abolish this system of slavery from on top, from the House of Parliament, the enslaved are going to abolish it from below through revolution. And so that was the message that the Buster Rebellion sent, and the British Parliament legislated abolition in 1834. So that was our physical resistance, our military resistance, but we also resisted culturally. Because remember, the people brought our ancestors here and brutalized them. And our ancestors had to find a way to create a space in Barbados of humanity, of a meaningful social existence. And so they had to do that through their cultural creativity. And I'm here to tell you, if you examine Barbadian culture, if you examine virtually everything that is good and positive and noble and authentic and creative about Barbadian culture, whether it's music, it's dance, it's nation language, what some people call dialect, it's proverbs, it's cuisine, it's spirituality, you name it, it's folklore. They all come from the people from down below. They don't come from the European elite at the top of the society. The music, the dance, the poetry, the literature, the proverbs, they come from the masses of the black people. And so we had to be creative culturally to create a meaningful social existence for ourselves in this country, and we have succeeded tremendously well. The last thing I want to tell you is our ancestors created all of that great wealth you see amassed in Europe. Any of you who have gone to London, for example, you see these massive buildings. You see all of this concentration of wealth. Where did it come from? Well, a lot of it came from places like Barbados. Because back in the 60s, you hear about the Industrial Revolution? Well, let me share this with you. Europe's Industrial Revolution began in Barbados. Sounds strange, right? In 1640s, there were no factories in England. If you wanted to find factories in the 1640s, you had to come to Barbados, because that sugar plantation, it was the sugar fields, the fields of cane to produce the cane. It was the windmill to grind the sugar cane to produce the cane juice. And then it was the sugar factory or boiling house to put the cane juice through various heating and chemical processes to produce molasses, sugar, rum. That was the first industrial enterprise. And that industrial enterprise was run by black people. They tell you that our ancestors were hewers of wood and drawers of water, that they worked in the fields. What they don't tell you is that on those plantations, the carpenter was the black man, the blacksmith was the black man, the cooper was the black man, the boiler in the sugar factory was the black man. They were all slaves, but they had technical skills. And many of them had brought those technical skills with them from Africa. How do we know that? We know that because the historical research has shown that based on the proportion of continental Africans in the population, you had a disproportionate number who were skilled people, carpenters and so forth. So I'm going to end there, but I'm saying to you, we, all of us, we come from great stock. We come from a great people. We have a lot to live up to. Our ancestors made tremendous sacrifices so that we could be where we are today. We have now embarked upon a new journey as the Republic of Barbados. And the whole idea of the Republic is that we have finally come to the stage where we have thrown off all vestiges of colonialism. We don't even want any British Queen as our symbolic head of state. We have put our own native Barbadian president in place. We don't want any British Privy Council. We have our Caribbean Court of Justice. We have taken full control of our destiny as the new Republic of Barbados, the newest republic in the world. And it is up to us now to honor the sacrifices and the efforts of our ancestors by taking our republic, taking our journey a step forward and upward, and doing the best we can to make this Republic of Barbados the #1 country on the face of this earth. That is our challenge. That is my emancipation message to you. Thank you very much.